Keeping up with AI progress, it's almost impossible sometimes, isn't it?
It really is moving fast.
That's why we do these deep dives. We take a source, something you're curious about, and really dig in to find the core insights. Get you up to speed without the heavy lifting.
And today, our source is the technical report for Seed1.5-VL. It's a new multimodal AI model.
Multimodal meaning it handles, what, text and images?
Exactly, both visual and textual information.
Right. And this report looks pretty dense. Covers architecture, training, how it performs. A lot.
It's comprehensive, yeah. But our goal here is just to distill the key stuff, the main innovations, and what this model can actually do.
Without getting bogged down in all the jargon.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Give you a clear picture.
Okay, let's start with the basics. The report mentions 3 main parts to Seed 1.5-VL.
That's right. You've got the vision encoder called Seed-VT. Then there's an MLP adapter, sort of a connector piece. And finally, a large language model, the LLM.
The vision encoder, CVIT, that's where some novelty lies. Something about image sizes.
Yes, that's a really interesting bit. It uses something called 2D ROPE positional encoding.
ROPE.
Rotary position embedding. The key thing is it lets the model handle images at their native resolutions.
So it doesn't need to, like, crop or resize everything to fit a standard box.
Exactly. Older methods often had to do that, and you'd potentially lose detail or warp the image. This model can just take it as it is, dynamically.
That sounds much better, more flexible.
It is. And then before that visual info hits the LLM, it uses average pooling on the feature patches.
For efficiency, I assume.
Yes, makes it computationally lighter.
And I read something about image compression, too. How does the vision encoder help there?
Well, it effectively summarizes the important visual information into fewer tokens. So you can represent high-resolution images without needing, an unmanageable number of tokens for the LLM.
Fewer tokens, high resolution. Sounds good. Now, this Seed-VT encoder, it gets pre-trained first.
It does. A crucial step, really. It happens in 3 stages.
Okay, stage 1.
Stage 1 is masked image modeling, MEIM, and it also uses that 2D ROPE encoding we just mentioned.
And there's a teacher involved.
Yes, they use EVA02CIPE as a teacher model. It helps Seed-VT learn better visual features and understand structure.
How much gets masked?
A lot, actually. 75% of the image patches are hidden.
75%.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, what's stage 2?
Stage 2 is called native resolution contrastive learning. Here, the MEM-trained vision encoder gets paired up with a text encoder, also from EVA02COEPE.
And the goal here is?
To align the image representations with the text representations, basically teaching it to connect what it sees with descriptions. They use SIGLIP and superclass losses for this.
Got it. Connecting pictures and words. And the final stage?
The third stage is omnimodal pre-training. This is where they broaden the data. It's not just images and text anymore.
This is where the video comes in.
Right. They include video, audio, text data as well.
The report had a table on the data mix, right? What stood out there?
Well, most of it, over 91%, is still image-text pairs. But you also have about 4% unlabeled images and nearly 5% video, audio, text data.
So video is definitely part of the foundation from early on.
Yes, which is important for learning about, how things change over time, spatial temporal dynamics.
Makes sense. How does it handle video specifically? It can't just treat it like a stack of images, can it?
No, it uses a clever strategy called dynamic frame resolution sampling.
Dynamic. Okay, so it chooses frames and resolution.
Exactly. It tries to be smart about it. Instead of a fixed frame rate, it adapts. If there's lots of action, maybe it samples more frames per second. Default is 1 FPS, but it can go up to 5 FPS if needed.
Adapting to the content.
And it adds a timestamp token to each frame it processes.
And keep track of the order.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Helps it understand the sequence of events, even if the sampling rate changes.
And the resolution part of that dynamic sampling.
That also changes per frame, within a total token budget for the whole video, mind you. There are 6 preset resolution levels it can choose from.
So more detail for shorter clips, maybe lower res for longer ones, to fit everything in.
That's the idea. Balance detail and duration within the budget, which is around 82,000 tokens per video.
What if a video is just incredibly long? Like feature length?
Good question. If it's too long, even for the lowest resolution dynamic sampling, it falls back to a simpler method. Uniform frame sampling across the whole video. Just grabs frames evenly spaced out.
A fallback, okay. Let's shift to the data itself.
Yeah.
You mentioned 3 trillion tokens for pre-training. That's astronomical.
It's a huge data set, yes. Very diverse, high-quality sources.
The report talks about this long-tail distribution of visual concepts. What does that mean in practice?
Well, think about it. Some things, like cars, dogs, chairs, appear all the time in images. They're the head of the distribution.
Right, very common.
But then you have much rarer things, a specific type of bird, a particular historical artifact, a really unusual tool. Those are in the long tail. If you just train on random data, the model gets really good at the common stuff, but might be terrible at recognizing the rare things. The Biotrove experiment they mentioned shows this.
So you need to balance it, make sure it sees enough of the rare stuff too.
Exactly. You need to manage the data mix, maybe limit the examples of super common things, and make sure you include enough of the less frequent ones. It's a tricky balance, though.
I see. The chart dataset creation sounded really interesting too. They didn't just use existing charts.
No, they used open source ones, but they also generated a massive amount, over 100 million new examples.
How do you generate chart data?
They use LLMs, actually. One LLM would generate the text part's title, axis labels, maybe some context.
Okay.
Then another LLM would take that text and write code like LaTeX or Python code that could actually draw the chart image.
Whoa, LLM's writing code to make pictures for training another AI. That's quite meta.
It's a clever pipeline.
What about data for visual grounding and counting? Locating things.
Yeah, for grounding, they use data with bounding boxes around objects and also point annotations just marking the center of objects.
Points for crowded scenes.
Seems like it. They developed an internal tool using Malmo and CountGD to generate lots of that point data.
And for 3D understanding. That sounds complex.
It is. They focused on three aspects: relative depth, which object is closer; absolute depth, how far away things are; and 3D grounding, locating objects in 3D space.
How'd they get data for that?
For relative depth, they used another AI, Depth Anything V2, to estimate depth in lots of images. For absolute depth, they used public datasets that already had depth maps.
Okay.
And for 3D grounding, they took existing 3D datasets and basically turned them into question-answer pairs about object location.
Right, and then there's video understanding data and image comprehension, problem solving. Looks like a really broad mix.
Very broad. Video data included captions, Q&A, stuff about reasoning continuously through a video, long videos. Image comprehension had STEM examples, tables, diagrams like chemical structures, K-12 problems, adult education stuff, a real mix.
Acquired through various means, I bet.
Yeah, a hybrid approach, some manual work, some automated generation.
So how is all this massive, diverse data actually used in the pre-training? You mentioned 3 stages earlier. Let's revisit those.
Right. Stage 0. The goal here is just alignment. They freeze the big language model and only train the MLP adapter, that bridge piece between vision and language.
Just connecting the 2 parts initially.
Exactly. The report says skipping this can hurt performance a bit later, so gentle alignment first.
Okay, stage 0 is alignment, then stage 1.
Stage 1 is the big knowledge dump. Everything becomes trainable vision encoder adapter, LLM, and they hit it with that 3 trillion token dataset.
Focused on.
Broad knowledge, visual grounding, and OCR reading text in images. They also mix in a little bit of text-only data and instruction-following data.
Got it. And stage 2.
Stage 2 is about balance and complexity. They adjust the data mix to include more from various tasks: video, coding, 3D understanding, and crucially, they increase the sequence length the model can handle. Way up, 131,072 tokens. Allows it to process much longer contexts, like long videos or complex documents.
That's a huge jump. They mentioned trying a different training order too, training the vision encoder earlier.
They did experiment with that, yeah. Training both the adapter and the vision encoder in stage 0 while keeping the LLM frozen. Some other models do it that way.
But it didn't work as well here.
Apparently not. The current recipe only adapter in stage 0 performed better. The thinking is maybe training the vision encoder too early forces it to adapt awkwardly to the frozen LLM, potentially limiting its core visual learning.
Interesting trade-off. It's amazing how these training details matter. What about scaling laws? Does the report show how performance scales with data?
It does touch on that. They modeled how the training loss goes down as it sees more training tokens. For most data types, it follows a kind of power law. More data generally means lower loss.
Lower loss is good, but does it directly mean better performance on actual tasks?
They found some connection, yes. Specifically, a sort of log linear relationship, at least within a certain performance range.
Meaning,
For example, as the training loss for OCR data went down, the accuracy on chart Q&A tasks tended to go up somewhat predictably. Same for grounding loss and performance on referring expression tasks.
But only within a certain range.
Yeah, they caution it's likely a local relationship. You can't just extrapolate forever. Performance metrics eventually saturate.
Okay. After all that pre-training, there's post-training. What's the goal there?
Post-training is all about refinement, making the model better at following instructions, reasoning step by step, and generally aligning its outputs with what humans find helpful and correct.
How do they do that?
Two main techniques: supervised fine-tuning, or SFT, and reinforcement learning, RL.
SFT first. What kind of data does that use?
Two main types in the SFT dataset. First, general instruction data, teaching it to give good, concise answers to various prompts.
Okay.
Second, long chain of thought data, or long code. This trains it to output detailed step-by-step reasoning processes. They use different system prompts to signal which kind of output is expected.
How did they build this SFT data set? Sounds curated.
It was. Started with crowdsourced high-quality examples, then added community data, clustered it by task, filtered it using another model as a judge, and finally used a reward model for one last quality check.
So multiple layers of filtering and the SFT training itself.
Used about 50,000 multimodal examples, plus some text data and the long code data. Trained for 2 epochs, significantly, with the vision encoder frozen.
Vision encoder frozen during SFT.
Okay.
Then comes reinforcement learning. They use the VLM as the reward model. How does that work?
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Instead of training a separate model just to judge responses, they prompted the main VLM itself. They'd give it a prompt and 2 possible answers and ask it essentially which one is better. It outputs a token indicating its preference.
Clever reuse of the model.
It is. And they do some checks to avoid bias based on which answer is shown first, and use iterative learning to keep the judgments consistent over time.
What about RLVR reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards?
That's used for tasks where you can automatically check if the answer is right. Think STEM problems.
Math, science.
Exactly. They took multiple choice questions, made them open-ended, focused on harder ones the SFT model struggled with, and had the model output answers in LaTeX.
LaTeX, why?
So they could use a math library, SIMPy, to automatically verify the answers, a verifiable reward signal.
Makes sense.
No.
Is RLVR used elsewhere?
Yes, for some visual perception and reasoning tasks too, like following visual instructions where they use synthetic data and rule-based checkers,
Right.
or visual puzzles in games.
Like spot the difference.
That's a great example. The model has to find the differences and output bounding boxes. They use synthetic data for training that too.
Okay, then there's hybrid RL. Hybrid means.
It combines both the VLM reward model and the verifiers. Uses the verifier when an answer can be verified and the reward model for more general subjective prompts.
Best of both worlds.
That's the aim. They use a shared critic model and different settings to balance learning from both reward types.
And one last refinement step. Iterative update by rejection sampling. Sounds like a feedback loop.
It is. Start with an SFT model. Find prompts it struggles with. Use the RL model to generate answers for those hard prompts. Keep the correct answers.
Verified answers.
Yes, using the verifiers or filters, and add those good examples back into the SFT dataset for the next round of fine-tuning. They did this several times.
Constant improvement cycle.
Mm.
Okay, training all this must take immense infrastructure. Any highlights on optimizations?
Definitely. They mention hybrid parallelism, workload balancing, smart data loading, fault tolerance. Lots of engineering went into making this feasible.
Hybrid parallelism, is that because the vision and language parts are different sizes?
Exactly. The vision encoder and adapter aren't as huge as the LLM. So they use 0 data parallelism for the vision parts and a more complex 4D parallelism for the giant LLM tailored strategies.
Smart. Okay, let's talk results. Public benchmarks. How did Seed1.5-VL do?
Very well. Overall, the vision encoder alone, Seed-VIT, holds its own against much larger models in zero-shot classification, and it's particularly robust on some tricky datasets.
And the full model on multimodal tasks. Reasoning.
State-of-the-art on several major reasoning benchmarks like MathVista and V. Very strong performance, often beating previous bests significantly. Second place on some others, but clearly a top contender in reasoning.
Document and chart understanding.
Also state-of-the-art there. Text VQA, infographic VQA, doc VQA, it tops the leaderboards. Really strong on understanding complex documents and charts.
Grounding and locating and counting things.
Another major strength. State-of-the-art across the board on all the listed benchmarks for grounding and counting. Seems very capable at handling multiple objects accurately.
What about 3D and video? More complex visually.
good progress in 3D understanding, depth estimation, multi-view reasoning. Better than previous VLMs, though they noted a slight dip in one specific 3D object detection setup.
And video.
State-of-the-art on short video tasks and streaming video benchmarks. So good with dynamics. Competitive, but not always leading, on very long video understanding or complex video reasoning. But SOTA, again, in video grounding, locating things in time within videos.
Beyond benchmarks, they tested it as an agent, interacting with things.
Yes, they evaluated its ability to use graphical user interfaces, like on a computer or phone, and play games.
How did that go?
Very strong GUI grounding, finding elements on screen. And it outperformed baselines consistently as a GUI agent, actually performing tasks on desktops, web browsers, Android. Leading performance there.
And game?
Showed really good results on a set of web games, poke games, better scores, completed more levels than others in many cases. It scaled well, too, performing better as game interactions got longer.
They also used internal benchmarks for a broader view.
Right. These aren't necessarily saturated like some public ones, so scores might look lower overall, but they give a different perspective.
And the verdict there.
Seed 1.5-VL came in second overall on their internal suite. It was state-of-the-art for them in out-of-distribution generalization, agent tasks, and following simple instructions. Also strong in STEM and documents diagrams.
Where did it show relative weakness?
Areas like general knowledge, deeper reasoning, code generation, and captioning or counterfactuals, they suggest model scale might be a factor there.
Interesting. How does its size compare?
Roughly comparable active parameters to Llama 4 Maverick, around 17 billion, but Seed 1.5-VL performed notably better on this internal benchmark, and its O generalization was up there with big models like Gemini 2.5 Pro and OpenAI O1.
Okay. Finally, limitations. No model is perfect. What do they highlight?
Higher level reasoning requiring combinatorial search is still a challenge. Think complex puzzles like Klotsky or mazes. Visual chain of thought might be needed.
Search is hard for these models.
It is, and hallucination is still an issue sometimes. The LLM's prior knowledge overriding the visual evidence. They showed an example of that.
Persistent problem. So what's the big takeaway?
Seed 1.5-VL is a very powerful state-of-the-art model in many areas, punching above its weight class in terms of size. Huge progress in visual language AI.
But still room to grow.
Absolutely. Research continues on scaling, improving reasoning, reducing hallucination, integrating tool use, maybe even unifying with image generation.
It really does make you wonder, how will AI that truly sees and understands change how we work, how we interact with computers day to day?
It opens up a lot of possibilities, doesn't it?
Definitely food for thought.